She didn't even notice when it started, the running. Not the kind that wears out the body, but the kind that exhausts the soul. Running to please everyone. Running to fix what was never hers to fix. Running from the silence because silence meant she might have to face herself. And at some point she forgot what peace even felt like. Every day became a race. Between expectations, responsibilities, and the quiet ache she kept buried deep. She prayed, but even prayer felt rushed. She tried to rest, but her mind kept running long after her body stopped, until one day, she realized she wasn't running toward anything anymore. She was just running away. Away from stillness. Away from surrender. Away from the voice of God that had been whispering, "Be still." You see, exhaustion isn't always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's the soul begging to stop pretending. To stop fighting battles that were never meant to be fought alone. To stop trying to earn peace through performance. Because grace isn't something we chase. It's something that catches us when we finally stop. And maybe that's why God allows us to reach the end of our strength. So we'll finally learn the beauty of stillness. If you've ever felt like you're running and don't even know why, this message is for you. Because sometimes stopping is the most spiritual thing you can do. Stay with me until the end. We'll walk through what happens when she finally stops running. And before we begin, if these words have spoken to something inside you, make sure you're subscribed. Here we share real stories of faith, rest, and restoration. Messages that remind you that even when you're tired, God never stops moving. It's strange how easily we confuse love with performance. Somewhere along the way, she started believing that being loved meant being useful, that her value depended on how much she could do, fix, or carry. So she ran. She ran to meet every need, fill every silence, fix every problem before it had a chance to grow. She ran until exhaustion became her normal, and "I'm fine" became her prayer. The world applauded her strength, but no one saw the weight behind it. And even she didn't realize that what looked like control was actually fear. Fear of being still, fear of not being enough if she stopped moving. The race was subtle but relentless. At home, she felt the pressure to hold everything together. At work, she felt the demand to prove her worth. At church, she felt the need to look strong, even when her soul was breaking. And the cruelest part was that she didn't even know who she was running for anymore. Everyone had expectations. Family, friends, even her own faith. She thought she was serving, but in truth she was surviving. And each step she took away from stillness took her one step further from peace. God never asked her to be everything for everyone, but the world did, and she said yes too many times. So now, when she looks in the mirror, she sees a woman tired not just in body, but in spirit. She prays for rest but feels guilty for wanting it, as if rest were laziness and silence were weakness. But deep down, a whisper begins to stir, soft, persistent, familiar. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. She's heard it before, but this time it feels different. This time it feels personal, because when she hears it now, it's not a command, it's an invitation. And that's when she starts to understand. She doesn't have to keep running to prove her faith. Faith was never about running harder, it was about trusting deeper. And that realization, though small, begins to slow her steps. For the first time in years, she pauses. Just for a moment. The world keeps spinning, but she doesn't move. Her chest rises, her breath steadies, and in the quiet, something sacred happens. She doesn't fall apart. She feels the weight begin to lift, not all at once, but enough to remind her. Peace isn't found in the sprint. It's found in the stillness she's been avoiding. She used to think control was safety. If she could plan every detail, anticipate every outcome, and avoid every mistake, then maybe, just maybe, she could stop life from hurting her again. But control is a tricky thing. At first it feels like power. Then it starts to feel like panic, because no matter how hard she tried, something always slipped through her fingers. And every time it did, the fear grew stronger. She prayed, but her prayers sounded more like instructions than surrender. And somewhere deep down, she stopped believing that rest could exist without control. Control is a beautiful liar. It promises peace but delivers anxiety. It whispers, if you can just manage everything perfectly, you'll finally feel safe. But the truth is, peace and control can't live in the same room. Because control says it's all on you, and peace says it never was. She didn't realize that her need to manage everything was rooted not in strength, but in fear. Fear that if she let go, everything would fall apart. But God doesn't ask her to keep the world spinning. He only asks her to trust that He already is. In her quiet moments, she begins to sense it, that tension between exhaustion and surrender. It's the same lesson Elijah learned in the wilderness when God didn't appear in the earthquake or the fire, but in a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. Control always looks for thunder. Faith learns to recognize whispers. So she sits in her small kitchen, staring at her to-do list, and for the first time, she lets it stay unfinished. The world doesn't collapse, the sky doesn't fall, and she realizes something powerful. The weight she's been carrying was never hers to hold. The cage was never her circumstances. It was her need to control them. And when she opens her hands, even just a little, she feels the lock click open. It's not freedom yet, but it's the start. Because freedom doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with a sigh. That's how grace works, quietly, patiently, teaching her that surrender isn't the end of strength. It's the beginning of peace. And so, with trembling hands and a soft heart, she begins to whisper a new kind of prayer. Lord, teach me to trust you where I used to fear losing control. And heaven, as always, answers with silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. Surrender. It sounds like defeat, doesn't it? That's what she always thought. But she's learning that surrender isn't losing the battle. It's realizing the battle was never hers to fight. Because the moment she stops running, she starts seeing how God was never chasing her in anger, but following her in mercy. Every road she took trying to escape His silence was actually leading her back to His arms. She used to think strength meant pushing through, holding it together no matter what. But now she's discovering that sometimes strength looks like falling apart in the right place, on her knees, in the quiet. In the middle of the chaos she can't fix, she whispers, I can't do this anymore. And heaven answers, finally. Because God never needed her perfection. He wanted her presence. And the moment she stops performing and starts being honest, peace begins to return. Not as a reward, but as a reminder. The beauty of surrender is that it changes everything without changing anything. The same problems might still exist. The same responsibilities remain. But her heart isn't fighting them anymore. She doesn't wake up with the same heaviness. She wakes up with trust, and that makes all the difference. Because when she stops trying to carry what isn't hers, she finally has room to hold what is: joy, stillness, grace. It's what Paul meant when he said, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. Weakness isn't failure. It's an invitation. And when she accepts it, she stops hiding her cracks, because that's where the light gets in. Her surrender becomes her strength, and her stillness becomes her song. She's no longer afraid of not having control, because she's learning that the one who holds her never loses it. So she doesn't run anymore. She walks, slowly, deliberately, And for the first time in years, her steps aren't driven by fear. They're guided by peace. Because surrender didn't take away her fight. It just changed what she was fighting for. Not control, not approval, just presence, just faith, just rest. Peace doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with quiet. The kind of quiet that used to make her anxious. Now it feels holy. She sits in it. She breathes in it. And for the first time in a long time, she doesn't feel like she has to fill it with words. Because rest isn't just something she does anymore. It's who she's becoming. She's learning that God's presence doesn't always fix everything. Sometimes it just is everything. In that stillness, her mind finally slows down. The endless what-ifs start to fade, replaced by something softer. Trust. She doesn't know what tomorrow holds, and she's okay with that. Because now she understands that peace isn't found in knowing what's next, but in knowing who walks with her through it. And the same arms that carried her through exhaustion now hold her in rest. This isn't escape, it's return. Return to simplicity, to faith, to love that asks for nothing but presence. The woman who once ran through her prayers now lingers in them. She listens more than she speaks. She no longer begs God to move. She starts to notice that He already is. In the laughter of her children, in the warmth of sunlight through her window, in the silence that once felt like abandonment, but now feels like home. Because the absence of noise is not the absence of God. It's often the room where His voice finally fits. There's a sacred kind of strength in stillness. It's not loud or showy. It's quiet and consistent. It's the peace that surpasses understanding. Philippians 4:7. The one that guards not just her heart, but her pace. She doesn't chase anymore. She trusts, and that trust has made her lighter. She doesn't carry her faith like a burden now. She wears it like breath, natural, constant, unforced, so she wakes up differently now. Not rushing, not striving, not chasing approval or answers, just resting. Because rest isn't the end of the journey. It's the rhythm of grace itself. And in that rhythm, she finds everything she was running for: peace, presence, and purpose. Not because the world stopped moving, but because she did. And when she did, she finally heard what God had been saying all along. You were never alone. Maybe peace was never something she had to find. Maybe it was always there, waiting for her to stop long enough to notice it. Because the truth is, she was never running away from God. She was running away from rest. And God, in His mercy, never chased her in anger. He simply walked beside her, waiting for the moment she'd slow down enough to feel His presence again. Rest isn't weakness. It's worship. It's saying, Lord, I trust You enough to stop striving. It's letting go of what she can't control and believing that what's meant for her will never have to be chased. And maybe that's the secret of faith. Not to run faster, but to stand still long enough for grace to catch up. Because grace always does. If this message touched your heart, take a moment, breathe deeply, and let peace in. Whisper to yourself, I don't have to run anymore. And if these words found you in a season of exhaustion, know this: you're not weak for being tired. You're human, and even more than that, you're loved. Deeply, endlessly, quietly loved. Before you go, if this message brought you stillness, I invite you to subscribe. Here we share stories that remind you it's okay to rest, to slow down, to be held. Because every week, new words are waiting for you. Words that calm, comfort, and bring you closer to peace. So stay with us. Let's keep learning how to stop running together. And tonight, when you close your eyes, remember this simple truth. God never asked you to run toward Him. He's always been the one walking beside you. Patiently, faithfully, waiting for you to rest in his presence.